Welcome and good morning. Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Yarmouth. My name is Joanna Landsman. I'm the president of your Board of Trustees, and I am so happy to be greeting you this morning live from my home. I can feel you with me, and it feels good. Welcome again. At First Universalist, our mission is to explore our faith, embrace this community, and to engage the world as spiritual seekers. May we take those words to heart. Before our service begins this morning, I have the following two announcements. First, following our worship service today, we'll have our mid-year meeting on Zoom. During the meeting, we'll hear reports from Reverend Hillary, from Marge Titcomb, our treasurer, and from me. You'll also be hearing from members of the Anti-Racism Working Group, who will offer a presentation and discussion of the spirit of the eighth principle before we vote. Only members are eligible to vote on this motion, but all of you are welcome and in fact encouraged to attend our mid-year meeting. A link to the meeting can be found in the email you received this morning and in the order of worship. I hope to see you there. Second, let's talk about love. Share some UU love this Valentine's Day season with our Valentine postcard exchange. This week, Reverend Hillary and members of Congregation Connections will be outside our church handing out packets with 5 postcards, stamps, stickers, and a list of names from our directory. Come pick up your packet on Thursday, February 4th from 4 to 5, and on Sunday, February 7th from 2 to 3. And if you can't make it to pick up the postcards, email Gwen, and a friendly Congregation Connections member will try to deliver it to your home. But for now, take a deep breath and settle in to this different but still sacred space and time we create together each week. Reverend Hillary will lead us into our worship.
Thanks, Joanna. Good morning, everyone. How are you? It is nice to be with you on this frigid but bright day. Did anyone else feel a little bit like Shackleton as they took their dog out this morning around 7:30? It was cold. My name is Reverend Hillary Collins-Gilpatrick. I'm the minister of our beloved community here at First Universalist Yarmouth. And I mean it when I say, whoever you are, wherever you're from, whomever you love, whatever you have done, you're welcome here. Thank you for being here. Today, January 31st, we reach the culmination of a month of cottage meetings and worship services devoted to the meaning and the purpose of the eighth principle, a new addition to the 7 principles of our faith that has been in development since 2013. If you have no idea what I'm talking about when I say the eighth principle, if you missed the other worship services, if you missed the cottage meetings, if you don't even know what the first 7 principles are, that's okay. As I said, you're welcome here, and we will catch you up. Following our worship service today, we will gather as a community for our mid-year meeting, during which, as Joanna just shared, we will hold a vote on whether to endorse the spirit of the eighth principle, a principle that asks us to dismantle racism within ourselves and our institutions. As the Black Lives Matter movement was nominated yesterday for a Nobel Peace Prize, I am moved by this event in our congregation today. No matter how the vote plays out, we here in our small but mighty beloved community are responding to a call. I trust we will move forward in this anti-racist movement, a movement for justice, equity, and peace, either way. For the next hour or so, we offer a service in preparation for this vote, a service that will further inspire our anti-racist work and our understanding of our UU history and faith. Thank you to Jane Makala and Marge Titcomb, members of our anti-racist working group, for sharing reflections on these subjects today. And thank you, Sam, for another Sunday of spirit lifting and centering music. Our opening words this morning are the 7 adopted principles of Unitarian Universalism and the 8th principle as it is currently written. I will share both the adult version and the children's version of these guiding lights of our faith. The first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We treat people fairly. The second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We accept one another. The third principle, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. We keep on learning together. The fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We search for what is true and right in life. The fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large. We vote about the things that concern us. The sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We work for a peaceful, fair, and free world. The seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. We care for our planet Earth, the home we share with all living things. And the eighth principle, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. We work together for diversity and against racism and oppressions. My friends, our worship service has begun. As I light the burning bright symbol of our faith, won't you join me in saying aloud our chalice lighting words? We light our chalice in peace and friendship. Our opening hymn is number 318, We Would Be One. The lyrics are written in your order of worship if you'd like to sing along.
We would be one, as now we join in singing our hymn of love, to pledge ourselves
does it mean to be accountable? A few weeks ago, we reflected upon the meaning of beloved community, our sacred connection to each other. This week, we reflect upon another big word, accountable. Specifically, we will work together to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions. Across our nation, Black, Indigenous, and people of color have been loudly asking us, UUs, to join them, to ally with them, to make a place for them at our table. Have we heard the call? Have we listened? We as UUs already have the moral grounding. Do we have the will to say, yes, we are ready? What can we do accountably? Accountable simply means we do what we say we will do. I'm using we a lot these days. One of the exciting things about working to dismantle racism is no one has to do this alone. We are in this together. We are supported by each other. We are held and led by the UUA and nearly 50 congregations already committed to this work. The UUA even offers a curriculum called Widening the Circle to guide us. And there's the UUA learning community that meets monthly. This month at the learning community meeting, nearly 200 UUs heard from 6 Black, Indigenous, and people of color, UUs from across the country, as they each shared why this work as UUs is essential and how they each look forward to a future time when they can attend their UU churches as fully accepted. What do they mean by that? That's when we will be fully accountable in this one step in our quest to dismantle racism. A few weeks ago, I invited you to consider your role in 2021. What can I change about myself that will work for the good of all? For us as a congregation, let's imagine, what can we do as first you that will work for the good of all? Well, we could choose to work on dismantling racism, studying, exploring, working through books like Me and White Supremacy, then applying what we discover to the world around us. We could choose to be accountable. How do we do that? Well, here's an example. Here at First U, we hold ourselves accountable when we assess our work at least annually. And one example, in 2019, we made a commitment to transform our parsonage into 95 Maine, a home for 4 asylum seekers. We didn't yet know how, but we figured it out in just a few months, and over 100 people from 4 churches pulled together. We have now, over time, been home to 10 people who had previously been living in very tight situations. Together, we did what we said we would do. If we accept the call from Black, Indigenous, and people of color to work together to dismantle racism and other oppressions within ourselves and our congregations, our challenge then will be to figure out how. We could establish our goals so that we, First You, can be accountable together. I offer 3 examples to explore once we've made the commitment. We could assess the work within each of our committees and councils through the lens of oppression. Who is being excluded? And how can we adjust the activity to be more inclusive now or next time? We could connect with a local community of Black, Indigenous, or people of color. We could host community events, advocate for Wabanaki land rights, fundraise for or donate to racial equity organizations, and of course, keep learning together, all for the benefit of communities of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Oh, and for our own personal growth along the way. Then we ask ourselves, how did we do? Accountable means we do what we say we will do. Dismantling oppression is a very long journey, but we can take the first steps. However small or large, each step matters. I'd like to close with the words of Amanda Gorman in The Hill We Climb. There is always light if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. May it be so.
Thanks, Marge. Our half-plate offering this week supports the Restorative Justice Institute of Maine, or RJIM. RJIM promotes a cultural and systemic shift to how Mainers approach wrongdoing by advancing the use of restorative justice across the state. Its community-driven projects include the Youth Justice Program for Young People at Risk and the Restorative Schools Program, recognizing the fact that students learn how to be in community inside our schools. Currently, RJIM is working with Yarmouth youth and residents, following up on a racist incident that occurred in our town in November. The work of RJIM forwards a movement that builds safer and more peaceful communities from which we all benefit. You're invited to make your offering using the donate button in the order of worship. By clicking this link, you'll be taken to Give Butter, a virtual giving site that accepts a card number, PayPal, and Venmo accounts. You may also give your offering by dropping a check in the mail or using your bank's free bill pay feature. This morning's offering has now been requested and will be gratefully received. Thank you.
It will be for
morning. Well, the good news is that the words of the proposal we'll be voting on today are much simpler than the dense word thicket of the proposed eighth principle itself. Reverend Hillary read it to you. I'm going to, just in case you didn't get every word of that, I'm going to read it once more. We affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Whew! Could you follow all of that? In trying to figure out exactly what it asks of us, I actually took a sheet of paper and broke it down into components and subcomponents. I've joked that you have to be of the age that you learn to diagram sentences in school in order to get the full measure of it. I still feel that way, but I've tried to imagine the UUA committees of wordsmiths around their table, trying to add in just one more concept before they put the final period on. I think it may be like one of those plane flights where you're sure you can get everything into a bag that will fit under the seat in front of you, and then you end up checking 2 suitcases. But looking at the drafter's effort through the lens of our UU faith, it occurred to me that it did take a lot of phrases, a lot of concepts, a lot of words, just to hold all the faith and responsibility and commitment to justice that it carries. I've been part of several after-church coffee hour discussions and cottage meetings where participants raise questions about eighth principle wording. What does other oppressions encompass? What does accountably mean? Who's meant to be included in the words beloved community? For that matter, what about calling it a principle? Does this fit what we usually understand by that word? My initial reaction was somewhat impatient. I confess perhaps even a little dismissive. Come on, folks, let's not get lost in the weeds of word choice. We're not being asked to draft the eighth principle. The UUA's got that. Focus on the spirit of the thing. That's all we're being asked to embrace. But to my friends who pause to raise those concerns, your attention to the words, your desire to understand what they mean here to us have given me much food for thought. I see that those words concern you, not because you've been sidetracked into something unimportant, but because you're considering this proposal so thoughtfully. You had no intention of just saying, yes, that's a nice statement. I certainly can't argue with wanting to dismantle racism. Rather, what I've heard from you is, if we commit to this, we're actually going to follow through, and we need to agree on where we're going and what we're committing ourselves to. You are so right. Those are exactly the questions that we needed to ask and that we need to keep asking ourselves as we journey towards spiritual wholeness, because we will never have all the answers before we set out. Yes, words matter. They matter a lot. And we know we won't be picking the words of the eighth principle. When it is officially adopted at some future General Assembly, as I assume it will be, I personally hope the words will be easier to digest than the current draft. But it will read as the delegates then adopt it. I'm confident, though, that the spirit its words will embody will not change. The words that matter more to me right now are the words we've spoken to each other in examining what the spirit of that principle means to us. The words that more than 50 of us have used in cottage meetings, for example, as we've articulated what concerns or excites us about embracing that spirit. The words we've used to express to each other our curiosity, or our reluctance, or our sense of urgency to just get on with it. Those are the words, the conversations that weave us together and will help set our course, acknowledging our willingness to be accountable for fulfilling the goals we set for ourselves. And those goals will change over time, just as we will change over time. But we can agree, in the uncomplicated words of our denomination's children, that we will be working together for diversity and against racism and oppression. I am excited that by our vote today, we can make the spirit of the eighth principle a more visible and vital part of who we are as a congregation and who we aspire to be. And we can commit to being good ancestors, to those who will build on our efforts and continue the work when we're gone, bending the long arc of the moral universe just a little further toward justice.
My friends, we now come to the time in our service that we set aside for quiet meditation and prayer. This is a time to perhaps reflect on the events of the past week, look forward to what may come, offer a prayer for someone we know and love, a prayer for the world, a prayer for ourselves, or simply be here now, in this moment, and all that it offers us in sensations and emotions. So won't you join me now in taking a deep, refreshing breath and settling in to this sacred time of stillness. For all that we're able to express, for all that we hold inside and do not have the words. We hear you, we hold you, we wish you and all beings immediate comfort, continued joy, a path forward, and the seeds of peace. May it be so. All right. Thank you, Marge, and thank you, Jane. Once again, a morning where, do I really need to say anything else? So much profound insight and emotions, feelings have been shared. I'm excited for our mid-year meeting today, no matter how it plays out. So I do have a homily, so I guess I wrote it, so I guess I'll share it with you all. So growing up in a Catholic and Buddhist household, two religions that rely heavily on very specific physical practices of faith, I tend to consider religion as something which is done, enacted, practiced, rather than something that is purely thought or ruminated upon or intellectualized. And as someone who has spent many years reciting mantras and Catholic prayers out loud, moving mala and rosary beads between my fingers, crossing myself and holding my body in mudras, smelling incense, feeling droplets of water, taking communion, mindfully walking and eating, to me, religion is not something I am, it is something I do. I feel it. I embody it. I enact it. And of course, I do think about religion. I mean, half my job, maybe more than half of my job, is thinking about religion. I read histories and cosmologies. I contemplate and debate theologies. I believe in elements of religious goodness. But these thoughts, if you will, for me, are always grounded and fortified by actions. Buddhist teachers, one after another, have always told me I will learn more about Buddhism by practicing it than thinking about it. And so when I headed to divinity school, and as karma would have it, found myself on the path to Unitarian Universalist ordination, I kept asking my UU colleagues and mentors one question. Can you imagine what it was? What is the practice of being a Unitarian Universalist? How do you do UUism? Were we in person in our sanctuary right now, I would pause here and ask you all to holler out your responses. What is the practice of being a UU? How do you feel, embody, and act, do your faith? Maybe some of you are hollering answers at your TVs and computer right now. And if so, I love what you're saying. You're right. This question became and still is one of my favorite questions to ask fellow UUs, not only because it often leads to long discussions of our faith journeys and life experiences, but also because of the diversity of responses it garners. It's also a beautiful question to pose to UU children. I love people and animals, they often respond. I'm kind to the earth. I share. When asked how they practice UUism, adults generally have more complicated answers. But I've heard beautiful and moving explanations on the practice of writing and keeping covenants, commitments to social justice, and recognizing and honoring the sacredness of nature. More often than not, though, beloved UUs respond by saying, I practice the principles, which is a perfectly fine answer. However, rarely can I help myself in this instance, but follow up with a second question. So you know all the principles? Can you name them? Each one of our 7 principles offers a compelling ideal to strive for in life. They are both statements and directives. Number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Number 7, respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part. And returning to the theme of the Time for All Ages that Gwen and I led a couple weeks ago, our principles have some big words in them. Big, expansive, contemplative, imaginative words in them. Number 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. It's easy to intellectualize our principles, don't you think? Get bogged down in thinking about how challenging they are, wondering what their true essence is, or trying to visualize what it would look like for them to actually become fully realized in our world. What do these principles look like as embodied and enacted practices, though? You don't have to agree with me, but personally speaking, I think the practice of UUism is rooted in that 4th principle, which I'll say again for you, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That's a serious, scary, wonderful practice right there. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. As I read it, the 4th principle has no hints of finality or ultimacy, We're not on a free and responsible search for the truth, nor are we on a free and responsible search until we find the truth. This principle is a call to adventure, a lifelong, ceaseless adventure that requires us to be continually open to new experiences, new understandings, and constant change, mistakes, revisions, exploring, embracing, engaging, my friends. And this is not easy. Thankfully, we have the UUA to use as a model. We see the fourth principle enacted over and over again in many spheres of our association, including, well, the development of our principles. In the beginning, way back in 1961, when the Unitarian Church and the Universalist Church merged to form the Unitarian Universalist Association, a list of principles for UUs to unite in seeking emerged. There were 6 of them, and though familiar themes run through them, none of these original 6 principles still exist today. I wouldn't be surprised if some of you are already familiar with the 6 principles, but I'm going to share my screen and show them to you anyway. Can you see that? Yeah? Great. So here they are. I'm not making it up. This is UU World 1961, the 6 principles, the original principles of the UUA. So I'm just gonna let you read them over. Just, notice what you notice. I wish we were in person so I could ask you what you notice. I will say there are no children's versions of these to rely upon. And to use Jane's descriptor, there is a thicket of words with many of these principles. There's also a lot of man and men in them. So you can just Google 1961 UUA 6 principles, and this will come right up for you if you want to keep looking at them. Let me get back to my 7. So it should come as no surprise that the merger in 1961 was nearly derailed due to heated disagreements regarding the wording of these principles. Am I wrong to think that one of the practices of UUism is heated dissent in debate? Perhaps one of the practices of UUism is staying the course through heated dissent and debate. But the heated debate regarding the wording of these principles did not cease once they were adopted either, especially amongst feminists who took offense at the use of patriarchal language that was used throughout these original 6. Many look to members of the UU Women's Federation, whose responsible search for truth and meaning and call for the dismantling of the patriarchy motivated a review of the principles in the 80s, specifically in 1982 at the UU General Assembly that was held in Brunswick, Maine. Pretty cool, huh? This review culminated in the revised set of 6 principles, plus a new 7th principle that we know today, even though we can't always remember them. These new 7 principles were adopted in 1984, along with the list of our sources of faith. And can you imagine that process of completely overhauling the principles, adding a new one, and making a separate list of the sources of our faith? Can you imagine also if that process hadn't occurred? If a call to change the sexist language of our original principles had never been made? Or worse, if a call to change the language in these original 6 had been made, but was denied? How about this? Can you imagine if there was a call for revisions or additions to our principles today from a marginalized group of people in our beloved community? A marginalized group who expressed that the principles of our faith were somehow demeaning or left out a really important aspect of living a good and just life? Can you imagine if a marginalized UU community told us they didn't feel accepted by our principles and asked us to change them? How might we meet that call for justice on our free and responsible search for truth and meaning? What might the practice of being a UU in such a situation be? Though I love the fact that our principles were overhauled 25 years after they were originally adopted. Seriously, can we just take a moment to acknowledge how amazing that is? What a statement of our faith that is? I'm not one for UU elitism, but I gotta say, you do not see a lot of religious denominations revising their foundational tenets to meet the call of the age. What I especially love about that 1984 revision and adoption process, though, was that an article was also passed in the bylaws that year that required that the UU principles and sources be reviewed for changes at least every 15 years. How cool is that? Ours is a living faith, my friends, a living tradition, as is written on our gray hymnals, and our principles and sources, a living text. And what happens to everything that is alive? It changes. In this faith, we practice being open to change, and we do change, and we will keep changing. It's in our denominational bylaws. And guess what? This change doesn't just happen to us. We're a part of it. We make it happen. Lest I remind you of our current 5th principle, the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregations and society at large. In about 15 minutes or so at 11:30, we will gather for our mid-year meeting and vote to endorse the spirit of the 8th principle, a new principle called for by a marginalized group in our beloved community, the Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, or BLUE. This principle will probably be revised, but once again, it is currently written as journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and institutions. Big words, my friends, big words. And I'm pretty certain we'll learn more about this principle by practicing it than thinking about it. If you vote no on endorsing this spirit today, that's okay. That's where you're at on your free and responsible search for truth right now. That is okay. Be mindful of where you are, though. Be mindful of what's moving you. Be mindful of what your practice is right now. And I ask, even if you are not ready to vote yes today, do explore the practice of the 8th principle and see what you find there. If we do vote yes to endorse the spirit of this principle today, how wonderful that our search for truth will have led us here. Another point along the way to building a just, compassionate, equitable society. I can only imagine what we will learn as we practice it. Blessed be this journey that we are on, my friends. Blessed be this practice. Blessed be this moment in which we create, we share, we change, and we breathe. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 1051, We Are. And the lyrics again are in your order of worship. Thanks for playing, Sam.
For each child that's born, the morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreaming. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're grandfathers of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Thank you, Sam. Nice to have some guitar today. That was fun. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Kai. Thank you, Jane and Marge. And thank you all for joining us this morning. Once again, our mid-year meeting begins promptly at 11:30. We'll see you there. If you come a few minutes early, feel free to hang out and have fellowship with one another. A quick note that at the start of our mid-year meeting, we're going to take a congregational photo on Zoom. Gwen will be screenshotting our little screens of all of our beautiful faces. And if you don't want to be in the photo, you can just step away from your screen at that time. But otherwise, we'd love to have as many faces there as possible. All right, my friends, won't you join me in prayer as we come to the end of this worship service. May all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings experience profound joy and the causes of profound joy. May we all practice what we believe. May we practice what we preach. And may we always be open to change. And won't you join me in our unison benediction to close our service, written in your order of worship. For those who come here seeking God, may God go with you. For those who come embracing life, may life return your affection. For those who come to seek a path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. Our service has ended, my friends. We'll see you at the mid-year meeting.